Good morning, fifth grade. We're going to continue reading in our text, Early Americans, and learning about Mexican immigration to the United States and the role that the Mexican Revolution played in that. We're going to review our vocabulary words, and then we're going to keep reading in our text. Our vocabulary words are immigration. That's when a group of people moves to another country. They make their home in another country. So this picture is an example. The second word is segregation. That's when you separate people based on their race, their gender, or their class, how much money they make. And so this picture is an example of that. And then the last one is discrimination. That's when you don't include someone or they don't have the same opportunities because of their race, their class, or their gender, and it's not because of their character. All right, so if you turn the page, we are trying to answer the question, how did Mexican Americans get to be such a large and important group in the United States? And we said that was because they've been coming to the United States longer than other people, and because they are neighbors. It doesn't take them long to get here. And then we learned that the United States took over part of Mexico in the Southwest Territory, and they discriminated against the Mexican Americans there, and they even took away some of their land. And then we learned that even more Mexican Americans started coming to the United States because of the Mexican Revolution. And once they got to the United States, their life was very hard. All right, so now we're on page 3 of our text. And we're in box 4, and it says, describe the discrimination that Mexican Americans faced after World War I. And World War I took place during this time period when Mexican Americans were immigrating to the United States. Okay, so we're at the top of page 3. In World War I, thousands of Mexican Americans volunteered to fight for the United States. Still, many Mexican Americans struggled with discrimination. They were often kept from better wages, jobs, and housing. To deal with this, Mexican Americans formed labor unions and went on strike for better wages. They formed organizations to deal with social problems. Okay, and so it asks us to describe the discrimination that they faced. And if we go back in this paragraph, we know that they were often kept from better wages, jobs, and housing. And so in box 4, we would write, Mexican Americans were often kept from better wages, jobs, and housing. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the second part of box 4. It says, how did the Mexican Americans respond to the discrimination? And if we go back in this paragraph, it says, to deal with this, Mexican Americans formed labor unions and went on strike for better wages. They formed organizations to deal with social problems. You're going to write those 2 sentences in the second part of box 3. Press pause to write down the second part of box 4. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. And you can go ahead and turn the page in your notes. And we are going to, I'm going to read the next 2 pages because you need to know it, but box 5 isn't until page 5. All right, so we're at the bottom of page 3. In 1924, the U.S. government established a border patrol to stop illegal immigration. The Mexican immigration rate slowed after this. In the 1930s, America's economy fell into a depression. Turn the page. Many people believed Mexican workers were taking jobs from other Americans. Some public places were segregated. Children were punished if caught speaking Spanish in school. Okay, and so this map shows you where Mexicans immigrated in the United States. So if it's the darker colored states, means more Mexicans immigrated to those states. The grayish colors meant that Mexicans immigrated to those states, but not as many as in the dark ones. And these white states means that none or not very many Mexicans immigrated there. So you can see a lot, most of the immigration is in the Southwest United States, and that makes sense because that's the closest to Mexico. Let's keep going. We're in bottom of page 5. The United States and Mexico formed a program to return some Mexicans to Mexico. The program was supposed to be for people who wanted to return, but it didn't work out that way. The U.S. government sent back thousands of people against their will. Some were U.S. citizens, and some had even been born in the United States. During World War II, some 300,000 Mexican Americans served in the U.S. Armed Forces. At the same time, the United States started the Mexican Farm Labor Supply Program, or Bracero Program. It allowed Mexican laborers into the United States for seasonal work. So during the Depression, the United States did not want Mexican Americans working because they thought that they were taking jobs from Americans. But a few years later, during World War II, they actually needed more workers in the fields, and so they came up with a program to get more Mexicans to move to the United States to work on farms. So box 5 says, how did the Mexican Farm Labor Supply Program, or the Bracero Program, affect Mexican laborers? Give at least 2 effects from the text. So one effect is that it allowed Mexican laborers into the United States for seasonal work. And you'll write that sentence down in box 5. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. Our question tells us to give 2 effects from the text, so as we're reading at the top of page 6, we need to look for one more effect that this program had on the Mexican laborers. Let's start reading on page 6. Employers liked braceros because they worked for low wages, but many braceros were mistreated. In addition, they created competition for Mexican American farm workers. Mexican Americans could not live on such low wages, so they formed labor unions. And so another effect would be that the Mexican laborers were mistreated. And so we would write that down in box 5. We would write, but many braceros were mistreated. Press pause to write down the second effect in box 5 and play when you're ready to keep reading. And in box 6, it asks us, how has life for Mexican Americans improved? And we're going to keep reading on page 6. During the last 50 years, many more Mexican immigrants have come to America. The southwestern United States is home to many Mexican American communities. New immigrants join these communities regularly, keeping Mexican traditions alive. Life for Mexican Americans has improved slowly. In the 1960s, the Chicano movement developed pride in Mexican American culture. Today, America has more Mexican American representation in government, and prejudice is lessening. But there are still problems. For example, most Mexican immigrants enter the United States legally, but some slip across the border illegally. To stop this, border patrols watch for illegal immigrants. Unfortunately, it means some people think all Mexican Americans are illegal immigrants. Today, about 21 million Americans are of Mexican descent. Of that total, more than 9 million were born in Mexico. Mexican Americans are one of the fastest growing groups in the United States. Let's go to number 6. It says, how has life for Mexican Americans improved? And if we go to the third paragraph on page 6, it gives us 2 reasons. One reason is that the Chicano movement developed pride in Mexican American culture. And the second reason is that there's more Mexican American representation in government, and that has helped the prejudice decrease. So for number 6, we would write, life for Mexican Americans has improved because Mexican American communities have developed pride for their culture. And there is more Mexican American representation in government. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the second part. It says, what challenges do Mexican Americans still face in the United States? If we go to the fourth paragraph, it talks about how some people still believe that Mexican Americans are illegal immigrants. And so in the second part of part 6, we would write, some people still think all Mexican Americans are illegal immigrants, which leads to prejudice acts towards Mexican Americans. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. And so in part 4, this is an opportunity for you to revise your paragraph based on what you learned today. It says, how did Mexican Americans get to be such a large and important group of people in the United States?